Hi and welcome back to the channel. Today we are putting the Seestern and Tactical Frog Doxa Homage watches together. We are comparing and contrasting both watches to see what one comes out on top and ultimately what one you should buy. So without any further ado, let's get into the review. And here we are, folks. Apologies for the lighting today. It is a very dull, rainy day here in Scotland, so the lighting is not the best, I'm afraid. Hopefully you can still see things okay. I will, of course, have lots of macro photography throughout the video for you. So, on to this one then. I should point out right from the get-go, this is the first version of both of these models. The V1 Tactical Frog versus the V1 Seestern. Now, I only say this because there is a version 2 for Tactical Frog available, and there is also a second version of the Seestern with some revisions coming out as well. So we will keep the V2s for when they arrive and they'll be reviewed, and we'll probably end up putting the two of them together. But as of now, let's have both of these first versions of these watches into compare and contrast, and that's what we're going to do today. So on to dimensions then. I'll put them up on the screen for you. They're very similar but slightly different as you would expect. The Seestern has a width, an overall width of 42mm, a thickness of 13.6mm. It has 20mm lugs and a lug-to-lug distance of 46mm. Now over on the other side we've got the Tactical Frog. It has a width of 42.6, a thickness of 12.8, again 20mm lugs and a lug-to-lug of 44.3, which changes when you take those end links into account into 49mm. So some key differences there, we'll come on to those in a little bit of a second. So first off, let's have a look at the cases. So if we put both cases side by side for you, you can see the pretty obvious differences there. The Seestern on the left has a much thicker case. It's thicker, it's flatter. As you can see, it changes the profile quite a lot. The Tactical Frog, on the other hand, has a much thinner case and it is more curved. And as you can see, the Tactical Frog also does not have any drilled lugs, whereas the Seestern does indeed have drilled lugs, which is quite important. It makes changing the straps much easier. So yeah, bit of a consideration there. So the cases are the first thing. If you have both of these watches in hand, it is the first thing that will hit you is the cases. The Seestern feels much more substantial, if that makes sense, and the Tactical Frog is not a flimsy watch, but that thick case makes it feel a lot heavier in actual fact. It is notably thicker, whereas the Tactical Frog's case is thinner and it does hug the wrist thanks to that really nice curvature of the case there. Moving on to the bezels, this was a major point of contention, was that tachymeter bezel for the Tactical Frog. Now the bezels are inherently different. Obviously the markings are more traditional on the Seestern with that FT feet bezel there. But in profile the bezels are actually completely different as well. The bezel on the Seestern sits a lot higher than the Tactical Frog. The Tactical Frog is more low down and compact. The knurling, if you can see there, the knurling on it is sort of polished stainless steel on the Tactical Frog, whereas the knurling on the Seestern is actually bead blasted. Again, different styles. And of course the Seestern bezel is pretty much flat. It actually slopes inward slightly towards the crystal, but pretty much flat, whereas the Tactical Frog actually slopes downwards towards the case. So again, completely different case shapes really, and completely different bezel profiles, which are quite different. The actual finishing of both cases is very good. They both feature the high polished edges with the nice brushing on the top, and the finish of the bezel, apart from that bead blast section on Seesterns, is pretty similar as well, both having the brushed circular brush round the bezels there as well. So pretty similar, but that case shape and the bezel shape as well, quite a striking difference. The next thing that you'll notice as a big difference is the crystal. Again, when the watches are in profile, you can see that the Seestern's crystal is completely flat. They're both sapphire crystals, but this is completely flat, and it has no AR, or if it does, it has clear AR, which makes a massive difference. You can still see the dial poking through. Whereas the dial on the the crystal on the Tactical Frog, I should say, is domed, causing that distortion you can see at extreme angles, and it has that blue AR tint that you can see there, versus none for the Seestern. So very different crystals, and these are the things that when you pick up a watch that you'll notice straight away. The case, the weight, the actual design of the bezel, and the crystal. The crystal is quite important because it does distort that dial. And let's talk about the dials. The dial on the Tactical Frog has what looks to be applied indices, which means they are actually applied to the dial, and they are quite prominent, whereas the Seestern's dial actually has printed indices. Ironically, I think that is actually what Doxa uses, printed indices, but they are quite different. In reality, it makes the indices on the Tactical Frog look a little bigger, I think, probably because the surrounds are a little bigger as well, versus the Seestern, which is a little bit more compact, just of those thin black line surrounds, so quite different. Date windows are very similar, and obviously we've got the text placement. Seestern have went with a much more traditional Doxa style, top left, bottom right, whereas Tactical Frog have just went down the middle, very traditional watch style. So completely different dials. Which one is nicest is obviously up to you. I prefer the Seestern. I think it's a much more Doxa looking dial, if that makes sense. But it is pretty subjective, you know. I do like the Tactical Frog's dial. The text on the dial is super crisp, super legible, and I actually don't mind the Tactical Frog logo. I think that's quite nice. The Seestern's dial, on the other hand, has a lovely finish. It has that almost metallic sheen finish, and I do like the placement of those logo and the information. I think it looks very Doxa, very cool. And while we're talking about the dial, let's talk about the Loom. Now, Loom on both of these watches is superb. There is no question that the Loom is very good. The colour is slightly different. The Seestern has a sort of bluer Loom, as you can see, whereas the Tactical Frog is a little greener. But both certainly glow very, very well. No issues at all with the Loom. And if you buy either of these watches, it will be clearly legible in the dark, so there's no issue with that. Handsets on the watch, as you can see, the handset on the Tactical Frog is slightly bigger, I would say. It's just dimensionally bigger than the Seestern, and it is really your preference. I don't mind either. The smaller handset kind of fits in with the slightly smaller text on the Seestern, I think. And likewise, the larger handset looks equally at home on the Tactical Frog style. I don't think there's any, again, it's just personal preference. I don't think there's anyone that's better than the other here. What I would say is that the finish is totally different. The finish of the hands in the Tactical Frog is a sort of matte finish, whereas the finish on the Seestern hands is a deep gloss black. It looks lovely. I prefer the finish of the hands. I prefer the gloss to the matte, but again, that is just me. Moving on to that bracelet. Now, both of these on the face of it look pretty similar, but they are not. As I covered in the individual reviews, the Tactical Frog, the biggest thing about the Tactical Frog is those male end links. That overhang there increases the lug to lug quite drastically, and it makes the wearing experience very different. And of course, each link is the same. These three are fixed, whereas the Seestern has a true beads of rice, individual pieces of metal, much more fluid. It makes the bracelet much more comfortable, I think. It's a much more comfy wearing experience, I think. Totally different bracelets, even though they look similar. The Seestern's is far, far superior. However, looking at the clasps, Now, there's nothing wrong with the Seestern clasp at all, but it is very basic. You literally pop it open. I shall show you. You pop it open and you have to flip it up with your finger. It has got a nice milled clasp though. It's a no frills clasp at all, whereas Tactical Frog, again, milled clasp have went with the more traditional push button release, which is a little nicer in operation, if I'm honest. That said, of course, the profile of the clasp does change things slightly, with the Tactical Frog being slightly thicker in profile to the more basic clasp of the Seestern. So again, horses for courses. A push button would have been really nice, but we'll wait and see what newer iterations bring with that. So really, this has been the first chance for a lot of people to get an affordable Doxa Homage in both of these watches. I have bought both individually, obviously, and I thought both were superb. I think on reflection, both of these watches will scratch the itch if you have one for a Doxa Homage. Of course they will, and they'll both do it very well. The aim of this video is not to slag off one watch and praise another. It was really just to compare and contrast for you. I can give you my views. For me personally, the Seestern does edge the Tactical Frog out slightly. The Seestern is better in more key departments. For me, the bracelet, the dial, the handset, the bezel. Of course, the Tactical Frog, I believe the mid case, this case section here is actually nicer on the Tactical Frog. I prefer the slimmer profile. I prefer the more curved profile. But that is just me. I think the perfect world would be an amalgamation between both of these watches. If you could take the case of the Tactical Frog with the bezel and the bracelet of this watch, for example, and so on and so forth. If you buy either one of these watches, you're going to really like it. The Seestern does edge it out for the reasons I pointed out. That bracelet is just superb. I like the bezel better. I like the dial better. The Tactical Frog, on the other hand, has a much nicer case, in my opinion. It has a nicer crown, although the crown action itself is nicer on the Seestern. There's loads and loads of pluses and negatives, folks. Dimensionally, they are similar, but they're very different because of issues like the bracelet, the mid-case shape and size. The crystals change the look dramatically. So for me personally, I suppose I do prefer the Seestern. I think it is a more Doxa homage, if you like. The Tactical Frog is a lovely watch. I have been wearing both of these, and for me personally, I go with the Seestern on this one. This one wins version 1 Battle of the Doxas for me personally. Now, although this is a very subjective decision, some people might disagree, which is absolutely fine. It is worth bearing in mind that both of these watches have been revised into version 2s. The version 2 of the Tactical Frog is out now, I believe, and the updated version of the Seestern is on its way. I have ordered both of the updated watches, and I will be doing individual reviews, and of course I will put the V2s head to head as well. I think you can't go wrong with these watches. You know, both of these watches were around about the $180, £130 mark. Fantastic. You can't go wrong with that. I will put links to both of the websites that I purchased these from. It was Watch Dives for the Tactical Frog, and where you can buy the version 2 incidentally, and Seestern's own website for this one, and I will put links to both in the description down below. Now the version 2s are quite tantalising. They profess to fix a lot of the moans and niggles about both watches, so it'll be really interesting to see the version 2s when they come out. I will be interested in doing the reviews, and I've got them on order. I will do that when they arrive. So as always, folks, thank you for making it this far. As always, I appreciate you viewing the channel, and if you liked the video, please go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. That would mean a lot to me, and I will see you in the next review.